Welcome to No More Mondays, the podcast that helps you navigate career challenges through the wisdom of professionals who have been at the same crossroads. I'm your host, Angie Callan, and I welcome you to join me each week as I chat with leaders, entrepreneurs, and employees who are here to share practical, tactical advice and some inspiration on how they arrived at career satisfaction. From job searching and career changes to going out on your own, we're breaking down barriers and providing actionable takeaways to help you take charge of your Mondays and ditch the Sunday blues. Welcome to the No More Mondays movement. Hello out there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of No More Mondays. As always, I'm your host, Angie Callan. And if you've ever convinced yourself you can't do something because you've never done it before, then you better be all ears for this episode. As someone who has been told more than once that my speed of implementation and can-do attitudes are a little off the charts, I'm about to be rivaled, y'all. You're about to meet my friend, Robert Peterson, and he and I have known each other for several years from networking, where we also have the reputation of having a little bit too much fun because of our complete lack of poker faces that reveal exactly what we're thinking. And Robert is a force to be reckoned with, and you're going to get to learn some of his secret sauce today. He started out a post-military career as a planter, pastor, and mentor in the Christian ministry before moving on to his current work in entrepreneurship coaching, where he focuses on adding value to life by helping owners grow their businesses. When Robert puts his mind to something, he does it, including writing a book and publishing it in some ridiculous amount of days that you could almost count on like your hands and toes, crazy ramp up of a podcast, and all kinds of other super cool, let's do this mentality projects he's accomplished in his business. And you're about to hear all about it and so much more as I welcome Robert Peterson to the show. Robert, welcome to No More Mondays.
Wow, Angie, thank you so much. First of all, I love No More Mondays because I believe every day is fantastic, and we can dive in and do what we want to do. And so Monday's a fantastic way to start a week.
You're giving a little glimpse to how we'll end the show. But before we get there, we have lots to talk about. And I always have fun when we have our conversations. Shameless plug, I'm on one of the early episodes of Robert's podcast, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But let's give everybody kind of a little bit of background on you and some context. So tell our listeners about you and what you're doing right now in the world of kind of business and entrepreneurship. Tell them about Add Value to Life.
Yeah, so we started Add Value to Life Consulting in 2018. I'd spent 20 years in ministry as a pastor, missionary, and pretty much coaching people, but didn't recognize it as coaching at the time. And really thought I'd go out into the corporate world and be, a consultant and a trainer and teaching people leadership because I have all this leadership background and experience, and I don't like working for companies. And so it turns out I love entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs are so much like the missionaries I've been working with my whole life. And so I really identified with the heart of an entrepreneur and love to help entrepreneurs, find success and take another step. But more importantly, just have somebody on their side because they've taken this leap into the world of the unknown, and they're doing something out there that very few people are willing to do, and they don't have a lot of support, or they're not willing to ask for support. So I'm kind of the guy that shoves himself into their life and says, hey, you need some help, and I'm here to help you.
Bingo. And we both know, you being an entrepreneur yourself, and we have some overlap both in perspectives and kind of what we do. It can be a little bit lonely when you're doing this stuff and jamming on this stuff yourself. And it's really nice to have that kind of sounding board and support, even if it's forced.
Well, the challenge is that independent spirit that causes somebody to jump into entrepreneurship is also the independent spirit that holds them back from asking for help.
That's very true. And I'll give you my kind of quick, just personal experience with that. Is I'm very similar to you, that I'm not very good at being told what to do. I'm kind of unemployable and tend to think that, I can, if I put my mind to something, I can do it, and just why not? Why be confined to somebody else's agenda? And a year ago, I started working with a coach for the first time since I had started my business, which we began around the same time. And it's definitely a little uncomfortable because you're like, I'm not used to having somebody in my business, literally and figuratively, and challenging that your mentality and that, like, independence.
Well, and I say all the time that it's a little hypocritical for coaches to be out there coaching without having a coach. So it is a challenge to have a coach and be holding you accountable and be in your business. But at the same time, they're going to help you take leaps and bounds beyond your expectations for your business growth and for your personal growth.
It's totally true. What's that saying? A coach without a coach is like a doctor who won't go to the doctor. And for me, it wasn't because I wouldn't go to the doctor. It was just, you get sucked in. And then all of a sudden you look at it and you go, I need an outside perspective. And Robert is one of those people who can give you the outside perspective. And I would love everybody to know a little bit about your background, because you lived around the world and you've made some big transitions that people really kind of struggle with. One out of the military and then two out of ministry. And really this leap into kind of entrepreneurship. But talk to me about some of your world experiences and kind of the crossroads you experienced over the course of your career.
Yeah, so obviously I grew up here in Colorado and had never, our family traveled and did vacation, but we did it on the road. And so I had never flown in my life until I graduated from high school, and I flew to San Diego for boot camp and joined the Marines. And the Marine Corps was really good to me. I traveled the world. I was in 9 different countries because of the Marine Corps. I've seen the pyramids in Giza. I spent, seen the Sydney Opera House in Australia and Hong Kong before it went back to China. And so lots of great opportunities to experience the world in a completely different way. And I think that opened up my mind to this idea that the world is available, right? And for many people, they don't know the world outside of their neighborhood. And so for me to have had that experience. So after leaving the Marine Corps and meeting my wife and getting involved in her church, made the decision to go into full-time ministry. I did 96 college credits in 2 calendar years. And because I knew where I was going, I had a purpose. And
Yep.
So once I had a purpose, college mattered and I needed to have it done. And so I got it done, and we moved to Colombia after a year. We spent a year in Costa Rica learning Spanish. Our son was born in Costa Rica, so that adds a whole nother level to your language and culture experience. Spending those hospital visits and doctor visits, in another culture. And then we moved to Colombia with our 2 kids, and my wife and I started, coaching Colombian pastors primarily. And really, they love to preach and teach. They don't need help in the Bible and preaching and teaching. But what they do need help in is the fact that church needs to be run like a business.
A business.
And,
yes.
Yeah. And so a great deal of my work over those 8 years in Colombia was coaching them through the systems and processes necessary for the church to act like a business, the financial things, the people systems to keep track of your people and have, ways to, grow the church and just like you would grow a business. And so really those were my first coaching experiences outside of, direct Marine Corps leadership where I'm telling people what to do.
Yeah.
Now I'm coming alongside and helping them take steps in their growth journey.
And that really, I think you brought those two things together, because I think the worldview is an interesting perspective to bring to ministry, whether it's here in the U.S. or abroad. And then all of that rolled into really looking at, like you said, coach at you were a coach then, even though it was a specific subset. So what was the catalyst that really made you step into your business, this true coaching business, full time? What was the breaking point, or just the ripcord that you pulled?
So I actually had my dream job. I was living the dream. I was working as a pastor of outreach for a church here in Colorado, and it was the same church that had sent us. So I had a 20-year relationship with this church. The leadership, the board of directors, if you were, trusted me a great deal. I was changing the model for supporting our missions partners, which is basically the church was giving 10% of its annual revenue to support ministries around the world. And I was changing that from a transactional model to a relational model. Visited all of those people in their country, in their job, in their home, and and was working really hard to establish a relationship rather than a transaction where the church was exchanging a newsletter for a check each month. And the challenge with that is that if a missionary is being supported by a church and the church gets a newsletter that says, well, our marriage is falling apart, the church is going to say, well, now you're no longer qualified to be leaders, and so we're going to stop sending the check because you're not qualified. And so the transaction leaves open the possibility that the missionaries aren't going to tell you what's going on.
That's very true.
And so from my experience as a missionary and my desire to serve people at the highest level is I want to have a relationship. I want them to know that we love them, that we're supporting them, that we've got their back when the crud hits the fan, so that when their marriage is struggling or their ministry is struggling and they're having challenges, they're not afraid to say, hey, we need help, right? They know that there's an open door, that the money's not going to be an issue, the relationship's not going to be an issue because we're going to put them first, and we want to help them through it because the church is the best equipped to support them and help them. But if they're afraid to tell the church that they've got these issues, then it's all going to go down before they can ask for help.
And I actually think that there's a tie in there to like the larger corporate setting where I think a lot of people of all levels can have that fear of asking for resources or asking for support when they need something because it makes you appear weak and vulnerable and you can't do your job. But oftentimes all that does is send you in a downward spiral and your performance starts to kind of fall off a cliff because you won't just advocate for your needs. And so to me, there's a lot of overlap here between relationships in ministry and relationships in business and relationships in a corporate setting.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, for me, it was my dream job. And I just loved what I was doing. I loved the opportunities and relationships that we were building. And then the church's leadership changed. My mentor of 20 years retired, and the church, eldership, the board of directors brought in another leader. And there were 9 staff members at the beginning, and all 9, pretty much left within a year. And I was one of the last ones to leave. My wife was working for the state, and my kids were both here. My parents were both here, and so leaving Colorado was not an option. And the real catalyst was I was tired of being broke. And so my church was in Douglas County, which is at the time was one of the 7th richest, per capita richest counties in the country, top 10, and I couldn't afford to live there. And so, living close by, I'm living in the metro area, but it's still a sign of, the reality. And so I decided to start my own company and do something for myself.
And I think it's not uncommon to the catalyst being something external, like a large leadership change in a company often does trigger a lot of change in that reporting structure because it's just too different, good or bad. It's just very, very different. And so I feel like that's a logical shift. And then looking at it and saying, financially, I'm going to take the bull by the horns and set kind of my own destination. And everybody, for the 3 fans of No More Mondays who listen to every single episode, hi, Mom. I say a million times that I think there's no better exploration into self-discovery than entrepreneurship. So I'm curious, over the last 4 or 5 years, what have you learned about yourself? What kind of introspection has come to you now that you're truly in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, the first one is I have a terrible relationship with money. So I didn't know how money worked. I didn't know what money could do, and I certainly didn't believe that I deserved and should have money, right? Or the idea that, and so really ended up digging into some of the money mindset ideas that had been set unintentionally by my parents, because my dad did the exact opposite of what I was doing, and my dad did very well with his money, but we never talked about it in a way other than, balancing your checkbook, not spending more than you make, like nothing beyond the basics. And then of course some of the money mindset that gets planted by the church. And it's interesting because the more I've explored this, the more I've come to recognize that it's unintentional. It creates, so, there's certain Bible verses that say things about money, And if you take them at face value, just that verse by itself, your brain will say, oh, that means money's bad, right?
Exactly.
Like the idea that you can't serve two masters, you can't serve God and money. The problem is that's putting money in a position that it's not supposed to be in, which is exactly what Scripture is trying to tell you. Don't put money in the position where it has control over you, where it's leading you, where you're in debt, right? And yet, Jesus is very clear about he came to give us life and give it to us abundantly. He came to teach us to use money. In fact, the parable of the talents is very clearly a money parable. And if you take the money and bury it, then you should have at least put it in the bank rather than the two that used the money to multiply it and use it for good. And so there's very clear messaging in the Bible that gets misread and misdirected in a negative mindset, takes it into that place where money is competing with your love for the Lord, and it's not really that way. It doesn't have to be that way. It's not supposed to be that way.
I am resisting the urge to take this into a theological conversation about the misinterpretations of the Bible, and considering current events, I just ain't gonna go there, Robert. However,
good call.
What you bring up is a really interesting, I think, bigger point that, we're given a purpose and we're given gifts and we're given blessings, but we have to have the resources in order to go use them for what we're meant to use them for, which is why money can't be a bad thing. It's a tool. And you can make it your master, but just because you have it doesn't mean it's your master. And I think this is the perfect segue to talking about your book, because when you shifted into entrepreneurship, you really had to, one, almost upskill some practical tools around the financial management aspects of a business. But a lot of this is a money mindset or a mind shift. And I'm thinking that a lot of this was the platform of the book. And this is an amazing and a ridiculous story at the same time. So tell everybody about the book, but you also have to tell everybody how quickly it came to life. So tell us all about that experience.
Yeah, so the book's called The Entrepreneur Mindset Shift, and it focuses on basically the basic mindset shifts that you have to make in order to be successful as an entrepreneur. And so we talk about the brain and how the brain works and how it impacts your habits, and of course, how to reprogram it, right? 95% of the decisions we make are made by our subconscious. And so the majority of people are on autopilot every day. And unless they make an intentional choice to change that autopilot, reprogram it, they will continue to be on autopilot, and they will continue living the life that they're living because they can't change their habits and can't change the things going on.
And many times we didn't program the autopilot. Like you said, it's subconscious, or it's rooted in how we were raised, stories we were told when we were young. And if you just let the plane fly, you're destined to go wherever it was automatically programmed to go, not necessarily where you want to drive it to.
Absolutely. And I think for most people, that's a surprise. Like most people think they think. Most people think they think, and most people think they make incredible decisions in their life. And the truth is they really don't.
Sorry, everybody out there, your decisions suck. The irony of this conversation about kind of faith and the Bible it's just about to get ironic, because my equivalent of what you're kind of talking about is that there's this thing called the entrepreneurial mind bleep that I will not say because this is a PG rated podcast. But it's the very same thing of I think your mindset dictates 98% of your success in an entrepreneurial endeavor, because especially in the early days, it's so easy to ride the ups and downs and the waves of euphoria. Holy crap, I just got my first client. And oh no, I haven't had leads for 5 days. Oh my gosh, look at all this money that just came into my bank account. Holy cow, I haven't had a deposit in a month, right? And if you are too emotionally in tune with the ups and downs of the short term, it's very, very hard to find that baseline of consistency and faith and trust, Think and Grow Rich, that will kind of keep you going. You've got to keep your eye on that long-term prize, because if you just are too focused on what's happening from day to day, you're either going to throw up or you're going to get off that ride faster than you got on.
Well, you can't focus on the outcome. I think that's the piece that you have to let go. So you can't focus on the money coming in and out of the bank account, because you're right, that'll trash you. But if you focus on the process, you focus on the habits, you focus on the behaviors that are going to get you there, and you trust those behaviors that are going to get the result that you want. And then you have to focus on, am I making my calls? Am I getting the meetings? Am I getting the closes after the meetings? And then, of course, is my product, is my service matching what I promise? Am I delivering way more value than I'm taking from people in money, in cash? And if you're doing those things, the roller coaster goes away pretty quick.
If you do the things will come. And you're good at doing the things. So was it a month you wrote this book?
7 days.
Okay. I was going to say, I thought it was like maybe one hand, because you set a goal, right? You were like, I'm going to publish this book for my birthday.
Yeah, well, actually, no. So I looked at my calendar between Christmas and New Year's, which is normally a week I would take off. And I had one 1-hour meeting. And so outside of that meeting, I said, I think it's time to write this book. And so I'm going to write the book. And so I spent the days between, and so Christmas and New Year's were both on a holiday. So those were both 3-day weekends, longer weekends, and then the week in between. And I used that week and basically committed to writing 6,000 words a day for those days between the two. And of course, over the New Year's holiday, we tweaked but I had a phone call. I actually had 2 phone calls with 2 publishers, January 4th and January 5th. And the second publisher said, when's your birthday? And I said, March. And he's like, we could have this ready for your birthday. We actually had it by February 12th. I had 200 copies of my book by February 12th.
That's like 6 weeks, everybody. That is unheard of. And I don't even know if you can get like a print-on-demand Amazon book sent to you that quickly.
No, Amazon's much slower.
Yeah, let alone write to print that fast. So if you ever tell yourself, I can't do this because I've never done it and I don't have enough time, just go hit repeat on this podcast, please.
Well, and that statement you're making right there is, I can't do this because I haven't done it. If the human race lived by that creed, we'd all be living in caves still. People.
We wouldn't be talking to each other over Squadcast right now, that's for sure. And I tell people
that's
that all the time.
That's the most ridiculous statement. How could anybody wake up and say that's their excuse?
And again, if we go back to subconscious mindsets, I think this is one of them that comes up in both in the career and in like an employment to entrepreneurship transition, which is something I could go off on and talk about all day long. But, there's that, to me, it's almost like imposter syndrome, and we inflict it on ourselves more than somebody else assumes it about us. But there's that definitely it comes up with, let's say, a mid-level manager who wants to become a director. Well, I've never led a team of 50 before. How am I going to be a director? Have you led a team of 10? Yeah. Okay. It's all economies of scale. Just because you haven't done 50 doesn't mean you can't, you know what I mean? And so you really have to you have to give people permission, that idea that just because they've been in a box doesn't mean they can't go to another box. And I tell them the exact same thing. I'm like, if everybody only ever did exactly what they can do, literally, we would still be living in caves. That could actually be, I don't know that I'd mind living in a cave, if I'm honest, but.
Wait. As long as the cave has high-speed internet and a refrigerator, you're
Yes,
good.
yes.
Today's episode is brought to you by Libsyn. Do you have an idea for a great new podcast? You can bring your idea to life and start your podcast today with Libsyn. Our podcast has been on Libsyn for 2 years now, and we love it. Libsyn has everything you need to plan, launch, and grow your own podcast. Libsyn provides some of the best resources created by expert podcasters who will show you everything you need to know, like what equipment you should use, how to record great audio, how to get your show onto Apple Podcasts and other popular platforms, and much more. Plus, as a friend of No More Mondays, when you sign up with Libsyn, you get your first month of podcast hosting for free. There has never been a better time than right now for you to start podcasting. Visit Libsyn.com and use the code FRIEND, F-R-I-E-N-D. That's Libsyn, Libsyn.com, and use the code FRIEND, F-R-I-E-N-D, to get started and create your podcast today. And now, back to the show.
I think a lot of this is like the stories that we tell ourselves, because you did the exact same thing with Add Value to Life, your podcast. I mean, you had like 70 episodes in the can before I went, Robert, you started a podcast?
Yeah, So we actually procrastinated on it a little bit because I made the commitment. I wrote it in my journal January 2020 that I was going to start a podcast. I bought the equipment. I had it literally. I got mics sitting on my desk. I got the soundboard sitting over here. I had lighting because I was planning to do it, on video as well. And so January 2020, of course, everybody knows what happened in 2020, and I wish I'd have done it then because it would have 10x'd versus I didn't start it till July of 21. But I just made the decision I'm going to go for it, and we started doing one episode a week. Every guest I ask, who do you know that I need to have on the show? And they introduced me to 2 or 3. Well, if you multiply one guest a week times 2 or 3, you pretty quickly have a lot of opportunities to interview people. And so July, we started right at the end of July. August, my wife had a terrible medical incident, spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and we still didn't miss an episode because we had so many already pre-recorded. And as soon as she got out of the hospital and we were trying to roll back into normal, we were doing 4 episodes a week. And I can tell you right now that we've already recorded our 200th episode. I think 170 releases this week. So there's still 6 weeks, 6 weeks recorded ahead of where we, the episode that dropped today. And so it's been crazy, but I have never been afraid to ask anybody to be on the podcast. And so I put it out there. And of course, I started with my friends. I started with the people I knew. I started with the people that were here local and I had networked with. But very quickly, those people introduced me to people. And pretty soon I'm interviewing people in Florida, and I'm interviewing Bob Berg, who wrote The Go-Giver.
I was going to say, you got some big names through that network.
And it just continues. I've interviewed Mark Victor Hansen and his wife, Crystal. I've interviewed Gay and Katie Hendricks, who started the Hendricks Institute, and their disciples started Conscious.is, and which is conscious living. I mean, there's just incredible people, and it's all been because people are willing to jump on podcasts.
Yeah. Well, and you're not afraid to ask the question. So, shameless plug. I'm one of the early episodes, so you can go back and listen to it. And I think a message that came out of all of this is just subduing the fear of kind of the ask. This actually came up I was doing a presentation for like an MBA alumni group this week, and this idea of like putting yourself out there and the fear around it came up, and people just really have this hesitancy. It's likely out of fear of rejection. However, for every rejection you get, you're going to get something that kind of inches you forward. And if you can just subdue that fear and you put yourself out there, look what can happen. You've had 200 amazing conversations, which also provides a referral network for your business now. And all of that, and then the book and everything starts to really come together in this ecosystem that's helping you level up as a business.
Oh, absolutely. So let's talk about fear a little bit. I mean, the idea... You just got to remind yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Yep. They're not going to show up at my house and call the cops and say, Robert was bugging me, asking me to be on his podcast, right? They're not going to show up with guns and burning pitchforks. So what's the worst that can happen is they say no.
And they're more likely just not to respond than say no.
Absolutely.
I look at that as the worst thing that can happen is that a year from now you regret not trying to do it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and there are some people that I've asked and their staff responded and they got a hold of me and they said, well, here's our standards. You got to have 10,000 downloads an episode. And okay. I'll get a hold of you when that happens and we'll have a conversation. And then I looked it up. 10,000 downloads an episode is like top 0.5%.
Yeah, we're talking like,
of all
exactly.
the millions of podcasts. Like, okay.
We're talking about like NPR's podcasts,
pretty
like
limited,
that kind of stuff.
Pretty limited window. But you know what? The truth of it is, out of the hundreds of people I've asked, only 2 or 3 have focused on the number of downloads or the number of this or the number of that. The majority of them have said, sure. I'd love to have a conversation. Now, some of the people only give you 30 minutes, but I make sure to take advantage of every minute of that 30 minutes and recording from the time they get on screen to the time they get off, and try to put as much of it in the show as we can. And so
what Robert's talking about isn't just about getting podcast guests. This could be about clients if you own a business and reaching out and attempting to prospect or reach out to like that really, dream client that you have. It could even be about job searching, where it's like, I really want to work for this company, but I'm afraid to reach out and connect with somebody who works there. The worst thing that's going to happen is they probably just won't respond because they don't respond to anybody. You're not going to get blacklisted from an application because you attempt to connect with an employee. However, the potential upside is that you make a great connection and you have an internal referral and you get an interview. So to me, it's like, what have you got to lose?
Right. Well, and even better is every connection, right? So if somebody from the staff reaches out and then you're like, oh, okay, hey, what's it like to work there? Give me the inside scoop, because you can ask that person without feeling like an idiot, because they're not going to be in your job interview. And now you get to their boss and you've got a couple more pieces of inside information about, hey, this is why I want to work here, because this company has these pieces. And so every call or every contact is potential information that you can use. And of course, I take advantage of every connection. Somebody introduces me or makes a connection, and I'm going to use that person. Man, their episode was great. We had a great conversation about this. I think you'd be a great guest because of that connection and because of this. And so it's the same thing, a job interview or otherwise, work your way in, and you can ask the secretaries or the person that answers the phone, hey, what's it like to work there? What's your favorite part? And those give you tidbits about, like, if a company's going to blacklist you because you looked for information, you don't want to work there anyway.
That's exactly what I say. If they're like, oh, you tried to reach out. No, you're too aggressive. Not a fit. And I feel like this is a great line of conversation because, you and I have a lot of similarities in that, like, I'm a constant idea generator and I also have the compulsion to execute them on like you. One of the things that my coach and I have worked on over the last year is not executing every idea, because sometimes that isn't the right thing to do. But this idea of putting yourself out there, kind of combating that fear, making connections, making the ask, these are all really great practical suggestions, whether you're a budding entrepreneur who's trying to grow or get their business really going, whether you are job searching, whether you're somebody transitioning into entrepreneurship. So I want to know, what other great practical words of wisdom do you have for people out there who are just trying to get it done?
Well, I mean, obviously the just do it, right? If you get an idea, make sure you do something with it. And for people that are idea generators like yourself, you've got to at least honor the idea by writing it down, right? And being able to recognize, okay, I'm not executing on these things right now, but I've got a network of people, maybe one or two of these ideas are for them. And when you're open to that, guess what happens? You keep getting more ideas. And so I think that's really important. But really, the second chapter in my book is everybody's favorite, at least. It's titled Own Your and Take Responsibility for Your Life. And so we'll keep your podcast PG. And actually, in the book, it's $.
Own your poop, everybody. Yeah. The pastor says, own your poop.
Yeah. I'm not afraid to throw it out there. And, truth be told, God created all of us, and all of us do that. And that's the other reminder, I think, for everybody is that boss, that person you're walking in on that room, you know what? They still put their pants on the same exact way.
They're
Jeff
still
Bezos
humans as well.
They're absolutely humans. And you know what? If one human can do what he's doing, then you could do it too. And so what makes him so special? There's nothing. There's nothing except the decisions that he's made, the choices that he's made to have the life that he wants. And so you need to make the choices that you need to make to get the life that you want. And so that's the biggest piece, I think, for people is you need to know what you want.
And that's where that idea of owning it comes in.
Yeah, own
totally.
it. And the problem with so many people, I mean, what's the statistics? 70 to 80% of people hate their jobs. And I think we're culturally taught to hate your job. We're culturally prepared to hate the Monday through Friday. That's the reason your podcast is titled what it is, because everybody's working for the weekend, which is ridiculous, right? And so part of owning your life is saying, all right, this is the life that I want. Now, what do I got to do to get it? And figuring out, do I need to start a business? Do I need to have a side hustle? Do I need to, there are legitimate ways to serve people, to get yourself promoted, to get the job you want, to have the lifestyle that you want. And I'm telling you, if you don't enjoy your life, if you're not enjoying the journey, pull the cord on the side of the bus and get on a different bus, people.
Do something about it. It's funny that you bring up this idea that, so when Career Benders was born, the name Benders came from the idea of wanting to help people shape their future. So Career Shapers was a stupid name, so the thesaurus helped me out there. But a lot of it was rooted in this idea and just observation that I have that and you hit the nail on the head, we're really accepting of kind of professional mediocrity in this country, and that like the 4-letter F word fine is exactly that. And I subscribe to the idea, and maybe this is I'm a Gen Xer with some millennial tendencies in me, but I fully subscribe to the idea that you're permitted to have more, but to go back to that like practical advice, you have to know what it is you want. And sometimes really sitting down, setting those goals, owning what you have and what you don't have, taking stock is a good place to start.
Well, it's more than wanting. Everybody wants more. Everybody wants more. They want more pay. They want more stuff. They want more. And I think the challenge is so many people are stuck in that autopilot of, I'm going to do just enough work so I don't get fired. And the company's going to pay me just enough money so I don't quit. And that's the life. What kind of life is that? If that's the life you're living.
Exactly. And it's okay to want what you want.
And get it. That's the thing, is you can get it if you choose to have a plan, live intentionally, and take responsibility for your life.
Look at us. We're adding value to life and making sure nobody has no more Mondays. Look at that. How to put those two together. All right. So we like to give everybody out there as many little nuggets of wisdom as possible. So we're going to play a little game. It's called Rapid Fire Recommendations. It's usually slow fire recommendations. So don't worry. Don't be too stressed or nervous. And I'm excited for the first one because you've been to a lot of cool places. What's your most memorable travel destination?
I would say Kenya, because I was able to take my wife to Kenya on a safari, and her and I were able to go on that trip, just the two of us. And so Kenya was supposed to be our 25th anniversary trip, but we were there supporting missionaries and staying with some very close friends, but did get to do a safari and spend 3 days out in the bush. So
amazing.
That was pretty cool.
Speaking of large orange cats. All right, so you're going to give us 2 book recommendations because you're going to remind us about yours and where people can get it, and then I want you to give us a second.
Yeah, so my book's The Entrepreneur Mindset Shift. It's a real easy read. It's 105 pages, and I think, it's been well received. People really appreciate what it says. It's easy to read. It's an airplane read. I say, grab it before you get on the plane, and you'll be done before the end. But it has lots of application and things to actually do to make a difference in your life. You can get it at robertcpeterson.com. That's probably the easiest place to type in a domain. But it's also on Amazon.
Oh, perfect. On Amazon. And we're going to link to it in show notes. And don't discount the airplane read. One of my favorite books I've ever read specific to coaching was an airport bookstore pickup. Read it on the plane ride home. Okay, so give us a not Robert C. Peterson book recommendation.
Oh, there's obviously so many. The bookshelves are full, but I'm old school. Everybody's going to say, Napoleon Hill, but I'm a Wallace D. Wattles fan. So The Science of Getting Rich is pretty powerful, and it's all application. If you apply what Wallace D. Wattles says, he doesn't say there's a secret. He doesn't say there's something hidden you got to figure out. He just says, do this.
See, and there is your mentality. Just do this. All right, well, lighten things up. What's your favorite movie?
Greatest Showman.
Oh, it's Hugh Jackman. It's Hugh Jackman. How can you not love it?
And the songs and everything about it is entrepreneurial. P.T. Barnum was an incredible entrepreneur.
That's very true.
And so yeah, for me, it's helping people dream bigger. It's helping people believe in their dream and then do it, right? Have a dream, go broke finding it, and then start all over, do it again.
I love that the reason you like that movie is because it ties into this entire conversation, and not just because it's Hugh Jackman singing and dancing. And of course, you've got, I always ask about a podcast, and you've got a very good one to plug. So.
Yeah, so it's Add Value, the number 2, Add Value to Entrepreneurs. And you can find it everywhere. It's on 64 different directories. And so we just added French directory. It's in France, and you have to listen to it in English because we're not translating, but it's crazy now. We're in Spanish directories, and yeah, it's all over the world now. So we're pretty excited to have.
Add Value to Entrepreneurs is taking over the world, quite literally. And you hinted at it at the beginning of the show, but this is a show about Mondays. What's the first word that comes to mind when I say Monday?
Get it done.
I love it. You're allowed a 3-word pass on that. And I don't even need to say why, because I think that brings this whole conversation to a nice culmination of just. As we kind of wrap things up, you mentioned your website, but I want to give everybody a way to track you and your journey. So where can everybody follow along with you and your book and your podcast and everything that you're doing in an amazing and intentional life?
LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn's my biggest. I mean, I'm on Facebook too, but LinkedIn is where we really it's definitely more business related. It definitely is where we share everything that's happening on the business side, and it's where we're growing our business. We're building relationships through LinkedIn.
And Robert's connected to me, so you can find him there. And again, we will link all of this, the book, the podcast, the website, and Robert's LinkedIn profile to the show notes. He's done some great stuff live on there with his wife, who has incidentally also left her full-time corporate job thanks to these endeavors, and the two of them are collaborating on some really amazing stuff. So I would definitely recommend tuning in to Robert there, because if you haven't noticed, he's got some really great wisdom to offer. And we're going to get one more little gold nugget out of you before we say goodbye. What is your number one piece of advice on what everybody out there can do to get one step closer to a satisfying career?
Believe in yourself. You have value that the world needs. And you just have to believe in it enough to put yourself out there.
I have nothing to add to that, because it is whether you're an entrepreneur or an employee, the mindset shift can do very big things to what you think your potential is. So I hope all of you out there will take Robert's advice to heart and believe in yourself, because you do have value to give. Robert, this has been amazing. I feel like we could go down rabbit holes and talk about all kinds of fun stuff all day, but this is the perfect point to say thank you so much for joining us, for being on the show, and being part of the No More Mondays movement. I always love talking to people who have figured out how to just get it done and how to believe in themselves. And not only is Robert doing that, but he's helping others do the same, and that's pretty amazing. So there's some great advice and just great inspiration in this episode. I hope all of you out there enjoyed it. And we'll follow along with Robert and his amazing journey. So thank you again so much for joining us today.
Well, Angie, thank you so much for the opportunity, for your friendship, and for all the love and support you've shared with my wife and I.
It is never going away. I'm so grateful to have you in my circle. And for everybody out there, all of you listeners who so faithfully support No More Mondays, I would love for you to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating. As Robert knows, that's a huge help to going global and helping us to continue inspiring confident professionals with these amazing stories. If you'd like to leave us comments, feedback, guest suggestions, or again, grab all the links and show notes from today's episode, visit us online at nomoremondays.info, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of No More Mondays. Thanks for joining us for another episode of No More Mondays. Tune in next week as we bring you more insights and actions to help you improve your professional life and find career satisfaction. Don't forget, visit us online at nomoremondays.info for all the details, show notes, and recommendations from this episode. No More Mondays, we drop new episodes every Wednesday. No More Mondays is brought to you by Career Benders, Inc. in partnership with executive producer Jane Durkee. For more information about career coaching, resume writing, personal branding, recruiting, and entrepreneurship coaching services, visit our website at careerbenders.com.